3, 2, 1. Right. Hello. Hi, Jill.
Hi.
How's it going?
Good.
Yeah.
Nice to be back again.
Also, I was thinking about what we did on agreeableness last week, and one of the things that when I was going over it this week, because it's obviously, it's quite a very deep topic, and I thought, the worst expression of disagreeableness comes across as tyranny, and I was like, I forgot to mention that. And then there's the other part in just backing yourself is you need to have the skills that you can. So if you can take control of a situation or a group of people, you need something to be able to put on top of that to actually add value. Because otherwise there's nothing that you.
There's got to be some competency.
Yeah, and out of all the things that I needed to work on, that was the area that I needed to work on most. Yeah. And then also the part of listening to people, and if you a psychologist like you or I are, listening to people is quite an important competence to develop. And so those are the 3 areas when I was thinking this week that I was like, I wish I'd included that. I wish I'd included that last time. But that's not what we're talking about today. So we moved on to the next trait, which we're going to look at conscientiousness, which is also part of the big 5 personality, of the 5-factor model of personality. We spoke a little bit earlier on before we started, was you very high and conscientious.
High and conscientious?
No, it reeks off you.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I'm early even when I think I'm late.
At the birthday party that I went to this morning, we were the first people there, the first of 20. Nobody else had arrived, and we were on time.
Yes.
That's me too. You also mentioned that out of all the traits, that it's probably the most socially desirable one. That everybody's pushing for more conscientiousness in everything. Tell me why do you think that?
Well, I think people think that it's a sign of success. So if I am organized and I'm on time and I deliver and I manage things in an organized and thoughtful way, I must have things under control. And so it's rewarded in school. So if you are following a timetable, you're encouraged to have timetables. You're encouraged to stick to studying according to certain processes, and you're rewarded for it.
Very, very much so. Out of the 2 biggest predictors of success on almost every life measure that they have is IQ and conscientiousness. And the interesting thing about and this is also true for all the other factors, is that they are culturally universal. But conscientiousness is I would say probably about the most prized one. And in the clients that you and I work with, which are mostly professionals, like most of them are super high in conscientiousness.
And it's been a big part of their success. They would bring it up as a thing that kept them going, because with conscientiousness, there's also a persistence to complete. So I want to tick it off my list. I want to meet the deadline, and I want to push even if it's difficult and hard.
There's effort. Effort, or it's effort and industriousness is where that falls in. It's a persistent effort towards achieving a goal. So very much the opposite of laziness. Which is I think what low conscientious people often get branded with. It's quite just out of all the traits that you get, all of them can be tested in a laboratory setting, right? Except for conscientiousness. So, and then, what does that tell you? That tells you that almost everybody can manifest conscientious behavior. So organizing, categorizing, scheduling, planning, and that they can do that in a laboratory sense. Even low conscientious people are capable of doing it.
But the drive has to be there. And the difference between someone who's not naturally conscientious, they can be conscientious if it's something that holds their attention and that interests them, but they can't sustain the conscientiousness like as a blanket across their entire lives. Whereas someone like me, I can sustain the conscientiousness across all areas of my life because that's part of my makeup. And that's the hard part of people who aren't conscientious, is to be able to sustain it in certain areas of their lives. Because the downside is if you're not conscientious, your whole life has been an indication that you're not good enough, you don't fit into the mold, this is not the way that we do things. It is a very hard trait if you are against the grain.
Yeah, you're gonna have a tough time. Look, from the many things that you now work on, it's also like, that we work with people who are low also, and then it becomes a question on like, well, it's almost like in order for them to actually, I don't want to say achieve anything, but for them to actually make any movement and progress towards a career or finding a job or completing studies, let's say, inevitably part of the interventions and work that we do with them is about creating structure, and then it's about goal selection, and it's about daily routine. Yeah. And you and I both know, like, a daily routine that's probably like the most important thing, the single most important thing that people can change and affect, that will multiply across the days in their lives towards whatever the goal is that they've selected.
So what comes to mind for me is the people out there that are low in conscientiousness, the type of struggles. What are some of the struggles that people who are low in conscientiousness tend to have in their life?
Well, it's messiness, messiness and tardiness. It's okay. So let's say the one positive, if we're going to look for more of the favorable aspects of, like, let's say, low conscientiousness, and that would mean that you're very comfortable in chaos. Yeah. And sometimes in environments that are high chaos, like low conscientiousness is the appropriate. Yes. Is the appropriate link to that.
Yeah. And it would have supported you in COVID a little bit more than what my conscientiousness scale did. Yeah. Is that there is a comfort with the unknown, and there is an okayness with, I'm just going to see when I get there. Yeah. And I find that type of strategy is a stretch for me. See when I get there is hard. Very hard. And
because it's like part of, and it's hard for me not to actually judge, just from my own personal perspective, because it's like, well, which way does the wind blow? How far do you think that strategy is going to get you?
Also our strategy has worked for us in our history, so it's very hard to see an alternative strategy and see value in it. So a lot of people who are low on conscientiousness will always had the feeling like I'm wrong, or I'm not good enough, or I just can't do it. Everyone else studies. Why do I leave it till the last minute? And why does that actually feel good? And how do I actually perform under those conditions? Because people who are low on conscientiousness, they can still perform. Society makes it hard for them, but they can still perform, and there are still advantages of being that side of the scale. But society creates such a society rubs you up the wrong way and kind of keeps giving you evidence that your way is not the most acceptable way.
But it's like if you have children, say if you have one child who's high in conscientiousness, you'd be like, oh, that's awesome, because they're so forward thinking that immediately will take away some of your stress and fear about where they're going to wind up in their life. Where the other one is like, well, they're going to sail a boat this year, they're going to go to the Amazon like next week, and it's like, you can imagine, like, as a parent, like, you'd be like, stress, like that would stress you out.
It brings an example. My brother in his matric year, you could hear in his bedroom him learning to play the guitar, becoming a master hacky sack, and at the same time learning for his matric exams. And so for a parent to hear that, the mind is just like, well, this kid is not going to make it. But it's also like, there isn't only one right way. And for him, he wouldn't have made it through his matric exams if he didn't have the freedom to kind of mix things up like that. Him studying late into the night, if I think of someone who's low on conscientiousness, sometimes they will leave it till the last minute and study through the night and cram, but it's not a stressful event for them. There's some stress driving it, but for me, if I had to do that with my exams, I would fall apart. I wouldn't make it to the exam because the stress would be so overwhelming. So my strategy to avoid that stress is, let me plan so that I don't actually end up in that disaster zone. Whereas their strategy is, I'm not that stressed by the stress anyway. I'm actually okay with the adrenaline that comes with that. Oh, the exam's coming tomorrow. So they just haven't picked the same strategy that I've picked.
Yeah, look, I mean, you are still able to perform well, but because it's I mean, out of the personality traits, the ones that's linked strongest, and I mean, and the correlation with IQ is actually not that great. Is with openness to experience, But if I had to, both also do, we do psychometric testing and selection for jobs, and it's one of those things that, we would all, in most of the cases, unless the environment itself is absolutely chaos, like the whole time, in which case somebody is high in conscientiousness is going to have a tough time mapping that out, which is, you mentioned the COVID example. Which is like, okay, so conscientious people focus really, they've got such a strong future orientation towards them, and all their plans are leading towards these sort of future goals. And then over and above that, and so I think the part that it talks to most is sacrificing something today for a better tomorrow.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's 100% in the sphere of somebody who is extremely conscientious. But if that
I'm
future...
not going to eat the ice cream today because I'm going to wait until I've finished my homework before I eat the ice cream. Whereas non-conscientious will be like, yay, ice cream.
Yeah.
Deal with it later.
Yeah. and maybe if I get now, I can just try and get later as well
and
at the
the
same time.
non-conscientious, there will always be time. There isn't, it's not like for us, there's a time limit. There's sort of a... Things are boxed. It's like, well, this will take this much amount of time and then I'll have this much time. There's a big calculation, whereas non-conscientious tend to kind of feel that time is free-flowing. It's like, no, I'll make it. I'll make it. Don't worry. The exam will be fine. Don't worry. I'll get through what I need to get through. And then that's where they get tripped up, is that often the calculation was inaccurate. So they'll say, well, I didn't realize.
Optimistic.
Yeah, I didn't realize I couldn't get through 10 chapters in the night before the exam. Whereas the conscientious person has realized, well, one chapter takes this much time, so I need this much time in order to get through the work. Whereas non-conscientious often will say, oops, I didn't realize. And that's where sometimes coaching with them can help, because it can be, you don't have to swing to the opposite side of the scale again. You don't have to suddenly be rigid, because non-conscientious people don't like being restricted.
Right.
So, but there's a benefit to some level of structure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's about, so you said about the thing about being restricted, and it's like, that free spirit, so to speak, so it's almost like in that, eat, pray, love vibe, and there is something romantic about that as well, and like, I mean, it's also, that's where you also kind of find low impulse control,
Yeah, for sure.
But then in the same breath, that's also where you find,
creativity
and spontaneity,
yeah.
And being spontaneous, and I've got friends like that, but the one thing that they have is that they're reliable. So, I mean, they're absolute messes on because I can deal with all the other stuff, which is actually kind of fun, But if they're not reliable, that means that I can't count on them. And if I can't count on them, then it just doesn't work for me on that front,
Yeah. What's so interesting, I don't know if you can relate to this as well, is that if you are a conscientious person, you're almost always paired up in a work situation with someone who's non-conscientious. And even in your personal relationships, your best friend will be the opposite, your partner will be the opposite, because there's something to learning. For me as a conscientious person, there's something to learning freedom and flexibility and being okay with the spontaneity.
About letting go.
Yes.
That kind of tension.
With the same breath, there's also something to someone who's on that end of the scale to also understand that there is a benefit to planning your trip before you're going, because I always think my husband is always like, well, just get in the car, we'll see what goes, and I'm like, not going to work for me. It's like, where's the list, what must we buy, when are we leaving, what's the exact time? And from my side, I can put a lot of pressure on him, because and that's the downside of the conscientious person, is that I need a lot of information so that I can plan.
And there's the structure that I'm creating, and you need to
fit into it.
Right, and you need to fit into this kind of thing and stuff like that, because this is the most efficient way of doing it. why would you mess around with something that I know will work?
Yeah.
And you like come with your devil may care attitude.
Yes.
Yeah, like, hey, you know.
But also some of the most magical experiences I've had is when I've let go of the planning. So it's like, well, how do we merge the two instead of believing that one is right and one is wrong? How do we take the positive characteristics of both sides? Because there can be, in a corporate environment, if you are the person who is able to turn on a dime, adjust as things happen, there's an advantage of being that way. And you can add value to a team if you are like that, but you can also frustrate a team if you're not going to stick to the project plan.
Yep. Look, I mean, it's like conscientiousness predicts promotion in a corporate structure. You know what I mean? Because that's what they lean on. Creativity less so. That comes later maybe, but definitely not in the start. But conscientiousness is pretty much like it's a no-brainer from the get-go. Because everything is around coordinating. And being in efficiency is the
and delivering on time.
Efficiency and outcomes and results are that's the currency of companies at the end of the day, and the better you are at that. And it's a weird thing, conscientious people recognize other conscientious people.
Yeah.
And it's like, there's that sort of cliched saying where it's like, if you want to get something done, you give it to the busiest person there. Because like they're also the most efficient person, generally speaking, as well. And I know if I enter into any kind of sort of corporate structure, I immediately look for who. You
can tell that by the look and how they organize their desk. Just as simple as that.
Right. Yeah. Like how ordered they are. Okay, and then the thing with orderliness, which is definitely that's a big facet of conscientiousness, and the downside of that is like you can also order things to death.
Yeah, and that can also
become
irritate
overly
people.
Ordered. Yeah,
because sometimes it's unnecessary, and sometimes there is in certain, like for me, planning too far ahead is actually to my disadvantage because my work doesn't allow me to do that often. And so I actually need to be okay with not having a plan for 6 months and being okay with knowing that I'm capable of putting a plan together if I need to.
I've definitely become more flexible over the years. I mean, like that whole kind of type A, like just absolutely ruthless efficiency the whole time. And I don't think that was appreciated that much either, you know, because it's just too much, you know. I mean, like everything is just towards like time and being efficient. I remember I worked in Germany many years ago, and I was a software engineer there, and that is an unbelievably ordered society as is. You know, and when I came back from that, I was like, what has happened to me? I'm like this, but it was such a natural fit for me because the environment sort of like allowed this to sort of manifest in the culture and in the work environment, and I was like, wow, like okay, so I know what it is that I'm capable of in that sort of structure, but part of me resented it.
Creates a lot of stress. I think it's kind of a system that delivers results, but you are pushing yourself quite hard. And I think that's, again, the learning lesson that you'll find is that someone who's not conscientious doesn't have this like cloud hanging over them of like, look at the time, have we met that, we haven't delivered that. Because in my mind as a conscientious person, and I'm only reflecting on my own mind, is it's always like these calculations all the time. It's like, if that takes 10 minutes, then this was going to take 10 minutes, then it's going to take me 4 hours, then I'm going to get this done. And I'm already planning as a conscientious person on a Sunday. I'm already thinking Monday's going to be like this, Tuesday's going to be like this, and that's part of my planning and my stress management. But a non-conscientious person, no ways. That hasn't even crossed their mind. It's like, what are you on a Sunday night?
Nice, hey?
Which is it's a real freedom. On a Sunday night, a non-conscientious person isn't worrying about what's Monday morning. Whereas me, I've already planned my Thursday morning. I could have gone that route, and in fact, I was in that route. But there was, I mean, it's in like I don't know, like I mean, you high on that, you know. Just something that you said earlier on, you know, where it's like
because you can will yourself to be conscientious, you know.
If the need is there, you can. Yeah.
You know, and it's like, well, you know, parents want their children to be more conscientious. You know, we've got the school would like children to be more conscientious. The work environment would want people to become more conscientious. You know, so a lot of those structures provide like a space where that is the thing that's manifested. Like you have tasks to do. This is the time that you have to complete that task, and you need to sort of keep track on how productive you are. You know, and if you are so productive, then you're rewarded accordingly. You know.
Yeah, but I always say, and I think I'd said that last week as well, is that we have a first gear and a second gear. My first gear is conscientiousness. It's the tool I'm going to. It's my go-to. It's the one that I think is going to work the best. But again, if we are trying to integrate, we're trying to be able to use first and second gear. So I need to be able to say, in this scenario, is first gear the most optimal one? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe I must shift to a different gear. And we need to realize that as much as our preference might be for a first gear, I have full control over choosing the gear that I want to go in. And I think sometimes there's a misconception with personality is because it's fairly stable.
Yeah.
It's not something that people think they can change, but I'm fully in agreement you can choose.
Well, look, so my thoughts on that are, okay, so whatever your score is on the scale, okay, you're not really going to change that too much. But like the spread, you know, the standard deviation points, like let's say like that, you can expand, you know, like the curve is flattened out, and then
you won't swing to the other end of the scale, but you might broaden your bag of tricks.
So and I mean, I think that goes hand in hand with our argument that we say that to be integrated is a much more complete human being and is much more able to deal with all the vagaries in life, you know. So it's like it's not about becoming exactly your polar opposite, but it's like about maybe having a look over the fence and going, you know what, like do that looks like something that is useful and is helpful, and okay, and then maybe just that one behavior and kind of start on that front, you know. You're not in absolute agreement with that.
Yeah, because I think also that people must understand that you do still have freedom around your behavior. What I find is that when we're all comfort seeking, so my comfort is my first gear. My comfort is what I know. It's conscientiousness. It's what I've been doing my whole life.
You wake up like that, you go to bed like that, you brush your teeth like that.
But if I'm going to choose a behavior that's outside of that, I've got to understand and accept that there's going to be discomfort. I can't suddenly say, well, today I'm going to be spontaneous and it's going to feel good. Yes, there must be an advantage of doing it, but it's not going to feel good because it's outside of my comfort zone.
I mean, it's also like how conscientious people follow rules. You know, so and are very rule abiding. You know, and then I suppose the dark expression of that is become extremely rigid. You know?
For sure.
And there's also, I've observed this. I don't know whether you've either experienced this or seen that, but there's like a range of effectiveness with conscientiousness, where it's like you need to operate within that band, and if you step out of that band, it's off a cliff. You know, and then it becomes this hyper,
this weight.
It becomes, it turns into like almost obsession. You know? Like, and it's like this hyper control, and it's like it's quite hard in perfectionists to kind of step out from that, you know.
And then you're very hard to work with. Then you're an outlier there. You know, the work environment, it's so extreme that you become difficult.
Yeah, like making it more difficult for you to rally up support should you need it.
And also the way that the world is going, that level of rigidity is not going to serve you because there's not as much room to control everything. You know, so it actually will become a handbrake for you, something or like a weight that holds you back from delivering at your highest performance because you're not able to shift as quickly to the changes that you might have to face. I mean, some environments are fairly stable and routine and regular, but the majority of our environments are shifting so quickly that you can't.
Yes, yeah. I mean, that's right. Well, it's also like, you know, with the instability of the future, like with COVID, and it's like the high okay, so the people that had a tough time were like extroverts, during lockdown, they had a tough time. I know that, okay, but this isn't about extroversion. And the conscientious people, like, okay, so they like to look far into the future, like
and they like to control. We like to have some sense of
control.
I know what is expected so that I can deliver.
Yeah, control is a big component to people who are conscientious, and that and also the belief that what I do today will impact tomorrow, and
the belief that what I do, the way and what I do will lead to an outcome that I want, because that's also a false assumption. In some ways it does, but in some ways, no matter how hard you try, how hard you plan, you may still fail the exam. It may still be like that. So that is the tough pill to swallow as a conscientious person, is that the world is still unpredictable, no matter how hard you plan.
Yeah, but you dare not take it. Why would you even take that chance? Like, why? Like, you know what I mean? Like, come here with your laissez-faire happy-go-lucky attitude. Like, that's not gonna cut it. It's gonna stress you out.
I always find how life delivers you the experiences you need, because I am conscientious. So there's a plan and everything's worked out. So I had a child who was like, no, a routine, Mom.
Actually ask you about your kid.
Yeah, it's like, no, routines. No, I'm not going to go to bed at the same time. I'm not going to eat at the same time. So that's why I say is it's almost like an opposites attract. You get attracted to the people that are going to teach you your biggest lessons. So a lot of that in me was realizing that not everything needs a plan, Joel. And I need to accept that, and I also need to understand that I'm capable of going with the flow. It's not because I'm not capable of doing it. It's not where my preference sits, but I'm okay. I'm not dying. I'm not bursting into flames. And if the day goes differently to what I expect, that's okay too. And so I think that is unfortunately the lesson we highly conscientious people will have to deal with in our lives.
Well, it's also, like the question on like, well, you are held hostage by the future, and there is with with low conscientiousness there's like this freedom to that, where it's like, where it's like in that kind of yoga-esque hippie kind of like, God will provide kind of thing. And it's like, no, it's conscientious people that provide.
But I think if you ask, if conscientious people are honest, they would say they deeply desire the freedom that other side of the scale offers, but they never allow it for themselves because they feel that the consequence is death. Is things are going to fall apart, they're going to go to
catastrophe.
It's going to go to the dogs.
Yeah.
And so we don't actually allow ourselves the freedom to play on that side because
and
of the fear.
For it, actually.
Yeah, you yearn. And if you get to taste it, it is as wonderful as you dream it to be.
Yeah. It's like, because if you see it, it's like, it's like, how awesome would that be? Because it almost looks like there's like few responsibilities, there's, and it's like, wow, like that looks like heaven.
Yeah.
Like, and it's like, well, when last did you have such little responsibility? And it's like, well, I don't know,
can't remember.
5 or 6 or something along those lines.
But also then it's
I don't even appreciate it as I should
exactly.
have, like retrospectively.
I remember our parents saying, when you're an adult, it's going to be very different. And I was like, Mom, I just want to grow up and be
whatever.
But
like if you think I'm going to be like you, like I'm not.
No, I'm
okay,
not.
you know what I mean? Like, I'm going to have this life, and then.
Yeah.
Going to like the mountains in Kathmandu, and and I'm going to find some arbitrary thing here.
But also there's it's like then in what ways do you want to introduce those little freedoms? Because again, we're not going to swing to the other side of the scale and suddenly drop all of our conscientiousness because it's serving us and keeping us safe in a sense. But how do we introduce those little freedoms? So for me, my husband has always said, Joel, you don't need to plan the weekends. And I was like, but how do you want to, don't you want to optimize the time that we are going to optimize your free time?
Maximize potential. How are we going to maximize potential? And yes, I've fallen in that trap.
Yeah.
And it's like everything just becomes about like what is the last utter drop
squeeze
that I can
every last of efficiency
out of this kind of thing. So not pleasant to be around.
Yeah. But then again, you also need someone who's on the other side of the scale, can show that, hold up the mirror and say, you know what, if you don't plan your Saturday day, what could happen? You know, so I think there's little ways that you can test and enjoy it.
You know, you can overtly see a conscientious person and a non-conscientious person if you park their cars together. Like it's like either a dirty car that hasn't seen a wash in God knows how long,
Yeah.
and then one that like is regularly cleaned.
Yeah.
You know,
But again,
I'd
it's
like
going
to
to
just
show
say
up.
that my girlfriend's car it's full dust. It's been down dust roads. You know, it's like yeah.
But it also is going to show up in different ways. So I have a partner who's not conscientious until it comes to the things that he loves. So
all things that he thinks are important.
Things that he thinks are important. So his camera gear is perfect. It's like labeled. Everything is immaculate.
Labeled, okay.
But other
He's an
things
engineer,
are not.
isn't he?
No, he's into computers.
Okay.
So, but other things are not. So again, when someone's not conscientious, when you see the stuff in their life that is organized, you know that stuff is really important to them because they're willing to.
Yeah, you're right.
To put the effort in.
I was just playing that out over with people that I've known and my clients, and it's like, yeah, it's remarkably disorganized except for these little
pockets.
Yeah. Yeah, these little pockets. I'm like, yeah, where that's just absolutely sorted out, and that's one of the things is that those are areas that they are interested in and are consequently also motivated and drive towards pursuing something in that area.
And it can be an indication of where they should put their focus in terms of careers or energy, because it's
very much
like a little, I kind of see it's a little clue. Whereas people who are conscientious, they tend to be that way in all areas of their lives.
Yes.
But what you will notice in my life, where I drop the ball on conscientiousness, is where I don't actually want to be, because unconsciously I'm like, it's not that important to me. So when I do make mistakes, or when I drop in terms of conscientiousness, I've got to be very mindful of what I'm doing there, because often I don't. And again, I'm agreeable and conscientious. When I'm dropping the ball on conscientiousness, it's because I've said yes to something that I didn't really want to do. And my drop in conscientiousness is an indicator that I'm there when I don't want to be. So all clues, yummy clues to spot that help us understand.
Yeah, and also like like what you're sort of touching on is how the personality traits kind of play off on one another. Which ones are more dominant, and when one rises to the fore, maybe like the one moves to the back. But generally speaking, conscientious people are conscientious in all avenues of their lives. You know?
I have in my old age consciously chosen that not everything needs to be. So like if you opened my handbag, it would be a complete mess. You know, there's certain things that I have given myself permission not to be anal about. And that's a nice freedom that that should be granted to all conscientious people.
Yeah, because like the developmental path for people that are extremely high in conscientiousness is they need to be able to tolerate a little bit of disorder,
yes.
And a little bit of mess around them, because guess what? Life is there's mess in life, and nobody wants to be in let's say a house that is just clinical.
Yeah. But also it's again like at what level of stress is it creating for you? Is that for me as a new mom, it created even more stress for me to enforce a schedule that my kid didn't want. So, okay, I learned to relax a little bit there. So it's like, where is it creating stress?
Make your life a misery.
Yeah. Where is it creating stress, and where is it using a lot of energy in order to sustain that balance? Where is it sometimes conscientiousness comes easy and it works and it flows and it just makes sense. Where sometimes you're really trying to force a square peg into a round hole, and you're trying to push it, you're trying to make it happen. In those cases, there needs to be more flexibility. And again, your level of comfort is what you want to be mindful of, because the more discomfort, the more there's a reason to change.
That's normally like that's how you identify some of your developmental areas, where it's like, okay, because you don't want to be hijacked by the bad parts either, and the only way to kind of work that out is actually to have some balance in it. It's also like conscientiousness is also my guess, and I haven't actually read any literature to confirm this. But if I look at my clients who have, let's say, like workaholic tendencies, the what work represents to them, in that sense, I would say that almost all of them are high conscientiousness. So they're either absolutely kill themselves to achieve a task or or a goal, or procrastinate before starting whatever
because the bar is so high, they've got to wait for all the perfect conditions before they get started.
Yeah, or it's just kind of like too much. So it sort of alternates between the two, you know. And it's yeah.
But yeah, when you say workaholism, I'd say that that's more prevalent in conscientious people than what it is in unconscientious people, because of the pressure.
Well, you
that
need
we
work in order in order.
But yeah, and I also think, you know, it's important to note is that even if you're not conscientious, it doesn't mean you can't work, it doesn't mean you can't deliver, but the way in which you do it is a very different flavor than what we would do it in. And we can also we can spot the difference quite easily. You can easily spot a conscientious person in the flavor with which they work. You'll see, I walk fast, I get things done, I sort things out, I've got lists, I've got diaries, I've got this reminder and that reminder.
I've got a whiteboard that's split on days, and my little notes that are on there, and my reminders for my girlfriend on the things that she needs to do on there.
And so the energy of a non-conscientious person,
which he still hasn't done, just by the way. And part of me, like, I don't want to be like the one to go like, hey, like
tick off your list.
Yeah.
But also we get satisfaction. We get satisfaction from ticking the list, but they don't. No. They didn't know where the list was.
Yeah,
it's like, there was a list.
And I'm aware of that, and I'm also aware of that, like, part that it can be like, that it can be a pain. You know what I mean? And it's like, well, like, how important is that? You know what I mean? And it's like, is she so utterly that I need to intervene? And I'm like, you know what? She's her own person. Like, I don't want to play the bad guy either.
Yeah.
And is it that important?
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, but I've had to learn that. I mean, it's not a thing that came naturally.
No. But that is also
I'd
the
rather
lesson.
take you and force you. No. And
Yeah,
you
my
will
way's
be happy
right.
in the end. Right, that's right. This is how else do you want to do this?
But that's what's so amazing about personality, is we realize that there's more than one right way of doing it, and that your right way is the one that feels comfortable for you, but it's not the only way.
Man, I was having a look like a while back at the riots, and then it was like, with all the looting and pillaging and everything like that went on, and it's like, well, the argument goes like, in a chaotic environment, the low conscientious response is actually the appropriate response, and part of that says, well, get while the getting's good. And whereas like for conscientiousness to actually be of use, the culture and environment needs to be stable enough so that you can leverage that on top of that, So otherwise it has no place.
That's what we said about COVID, is that the environment and the conditions don't allow you to plan so far ahead in advance. So actually you need to reach into your second gear and maybe be more comfortable with only planning today, or this week.
Yeah, I know without a doubt that both you and I have had clients there where it's like, hang on a second, you're trying to like work out something from like in the next 3 years now, and you analyze that analysis paralysis that comes as a result of you trying to do that, and you're not going to.
It's wasted energy.
Yeah, I mean, there's like a weird belief, and it sort of goes, well, if I just think long enough and hard enough, a solution will present itself, and it's like, no.
But I'm also trying to think my way out of a problem in the same way I got into the problem. So it's like, how do I think about the problem in a different way?
Look, I've made that mistake many times in my life. Like, I'm a smart person. I can do this. I can sit and I can genuinely think. So I can have discussions with multiple parts of myself and let it evolve till something like emerges, as a solution. And it's like, well, there are limits to that.
But also what the lesson that comes from a non-conscientious person is that I can sit with that and it'd be okay. I don't have to wrap it up in a bow, because with a conscientious person, we want to complete. We want to tick off our list. We want to finish. Whereas someone who's not conscientious can sit in the discomfort of saying, we'll see when we get there. Yeah. And it's hard work for us to be in that
part of me
side.
is like a little bit jealous about it and envious about that,
Yeah. But there is a lesson in both sides, because from their side, they also need to understand that it can't be open-ended forever. There needs to be a closure at some point. There needs to be a line in the sand.
You've got to go somewhere, like eventually, because otherwise, like all that happens is that you turn into Peter Pan or whatever or like I don't know what's the girl equivalent of Peter Pan, like Pamela Pun. I don't know, but there definitely there has to be a girl version or that. Although I think the male version is definitely more unattractive than the female version. Like nobody wants, that failure to launch thing, where it's like, well, like what do you want to do,
Yeah.
And in order to get out, and you've got to try and make something yourself and dedicate some time or something, and there needs to be some form of discipline to that,
Yeah.
But you need to know that whatever it is worth it.
But again, I think there's also a misconception that discomfort, so when I'm acting outside of my personality type, there's discomfort and frustration, that's a bad thing, and it's not. I can have discomfort in stepping outside of what my comfort zone is, and it still be good for me. And that's the lesson of conscientious people need to realize, that there can be discomfort in going with the flow and not having a plan for everything, but that can be good for me. And then on the other side, non-conscientious people need to realize that some structure can be to my advantage, but it may feel restrictive, and that's okay too.
Yeah, look, I mean, if I look into the, okay, so like the professions where you need to be conscientious in order to actually progress in that profession would be like lawyers and accountants, where
you struggle a little bit if you're not conscientious as an accountant. It's a harder experience.
Yeah, like that just means that you need to hustle in some other avenue in order to sort of maintain parity. Because it's literally all about that. It's about hours at the end of the day and how efficient you can be within that time. And it's like, but then, like how they can go into kind of overdrive, like when we start moving into the higher levels in corporates, and then those are people who, I mean, they just work like 14 hours straight, wake up the next day, maybe put on a new pair of pajamas, make sure that they don't have their cameras on, and then they just carry on working, working through that. Like I find that tragic. I find that.
But it's a
very disconnected way of being.
The downside is
it's profitable, and
it's profitable, but
there's a lot of productivity in it.
A weird loop that happens where you see it as a good thing. That's what I find with my workaholic clients, is that they isn't that good?
Yeah, the rationalization is so strong for that.
Because I have clients who also work 14 hours days, and then just taking a coffee break or a lunch break is a stretch. That's not what happens, Joel. We sit at our computer and we work the whole time, but they don't see it as a bad thing. They see it as a good thing, and that's the big challenge, is being able to.
And it's also the kind of approval, that it's like it's like, well, I'm useful. Like I bring something with a value that is being acknowledged by those around me, and that's where you get that kind of approval from, and that's really, I mean, it's a specific kind of approval. It kind of validates that that you're a go-getter, that you're a high achiever.
And if you decide to drop 1 hour that day and go to the doctor or the dentist or something like that, the consequences I'm useless. It's like I either am desirable.
I've lost time.
Yes.
And I can't get that time back.
I must work the whole of Saturday to make it back.
Yeah. It's so hard. I mean, that's an existence that.
But it's the same sort of thing with helping. Is that for me, helping is desirable. It's isn't it the kind and nice thing to do? But there's also a downside to helping. And again, it's that mental challenge. Is like, well, I'm working hard. Isn't that a good thing? Yes, it's a good thing, but if it's at your own detriment in terms of your health.
But it feels good, eh?
Yeah.
No, it does. I mean, if you're working hard and and for me, I'm like, and it's one of those, for human beings, it's like one of the few times when we actually experience positive emotion, is when we're making progress towards a goal. I mean, that's a genuine thing.
Yeah. But I also think that there's ebbs and flows. You can have a period in your life or in your week where you're pushing, but then if that's your constant, if that's your day in and day out, and the last 5 years have been 14-hour days, it's not sustainable.
No, it isn't. But both you and I have seen exactly what that looks like, and it's like, and inevitably, like from a physical health perspective, and that's the other thing is this belief that that they're performing at the highest levels all the time, and and I know that's definitely not the case, because then it's like I mean, if we test them like for short-term memory and that sort of thing, and they do worse, because they've stolen a bit from sleep here and a little bit from there, because like the
but
less
they
you
don't
can
see
sleep,
it that way. They see it as the more hours, is better.
Yeah. And this is how I show I am exceptional.
Exactly. But I always say is that if you look at nature, you don't see the flowers pushing the whole year. You see, it bloom and then it die, and then there's like an ebb and a flow. The same with like seasons.
I like that as an analogy. I'm going to pinch it.
Take it. Because that's what we need to realize, that if we are nature, we need the same ebb and flow. We need a winter time, a summertime, a springtime, and that can be in a day, it's daily cycle, in a weekly cycle, monthly cycle, yearly cycle. We need ebbs and flows, and that's how we are optimal, not the constant spring or constant. It's not. We shouldn't be in that phase all the time.
That's it. It's one season, hey?
And we should live our lives not as one season, but as this constant
this it's almost like this death and this birth and this renewal that's supposed to happen to that, and that's how we grow.
And that's optimal. But I think that's the
also
the misconception.
I think wisdom lies, like if you follow that path.
Exactly.
I've got how's this? I've got another client of mine, successful, very successful guy. Scores low on conscientiousness, but high neuroticism, so high anxiety. And here's the interesting thing that just fascinated me to no end, is he's not a conscientious person, but in order for him to contain his anxiety, he behaves in a very conscientious manner. So that there's two things for him. The one is it's how he manages his high anxiety levels, which is awesome. So that there's a structure and container for it, and then he still gets the additional benefit of planning and organizing and structuring things like that, which are beneficial for for his companies.
But then you wonder, is the source of the anxiety not because he can't behave in a more natural way, being non-conscientious? It's like the anxiety might have come from a place of, this is not naturally me, society is wanting this, I'm not that, now I need to give them what they want, which will create anxiety. So it's like this loop that you're in now. You've got the anxiety to try and manage
it gives the energy to drive that kind of behavior, and at least, and I'm happy with that, because it's like at least it's that anxiety is behind him, pushing him forward, as opposed to holding him back. Otherwise he wouldn't leave the home. Others he'd just hole up and he'd never venture forth. And whatever reason, it's just like he just has it dialed in so well, and I was like, isn't that bloody interesting? Yeah, so that not all roads lead to Rome. But we'll do that in another podcast when we start talking about the different combinations and that sort of thing. And if you ever want to hire somebody who will work beyond what you pay them for, what personality trait to select for?
It's conscientiousness.
Conscientiousness and agreeableness.
But don't underestimate the power of a non-conscientious person in being able to deliver, especially if the environment is chaotic, unpredictable, a little bit unexpected. That's when the non-conscientious people really shine, because they don't bat an eyelid. They just cope.
Well, so that so they can navigate those waters, and that's actually what you would want.
Yes.
So if there's a firefight and there's bullets flying left, right, and center, that they can actually walk a straight path, because they're used to that. It's like,
and
it's something they understand.
It doesn't worry them, and it doesn't overwhelm them like it might someone who's highly conscientious.
No, definitely not. And there's and the other thing that I like is that again, conscientiousness, like we find in all cultures. So if you're high conscientiousness, that's like organized. you're structured, you can methodically plan your way and you know, to sort of achieving something. It also says that the future is important to you, and that you're willing to sacrifice whatever today so that you can have a better future, either for yourself or for your children. You know, the part to look out for is like, don't live in the future, because you actually like live here, and it's quite easy. I've done that before, where it's like I'm living in a thing where that's not even real, and it's still changing. You know, and that future self might die actually. You know, well, COVID comes along, and that's like, hello.
But also, I always call it future tripping. Is that trying to plan too far in the world, planning too far ahead, can create anxiety in itself, because that's
too unstable.
It's too unstable, and also, it's a lot of energy going towards the planning that might not be necessary in the present.
So conscientious people, the rule is like, let go. You're holding on too tight. And for low conscientious people, well, maybe you should hold something.
Yeah, find some twig to hold on to.
Like some stick, you know, that will keep you afloat, you know, when things go by, yeah. And it's and a daily routine, irrespective. Like if you're a creative person, whatever it is, you need a routine.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's. I'm happy with that blanket statement. Is there anything else you want to throw there? Okay.
I'm in agreement.
Right. I think I thought that we covered that quite efficiently. Right. Okay. So that covers conscientiousness. I hope that was of use to those to people wherever they are, wherever you guys are on the personality trait conscientiousness. And I think that's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
Okay. Awesome.